world of cable news screaming and social media echo chambers, it's easy to lose the signal in the noise. Every day, policy is debated, votes are cast, and your tax dollars are spent. We cut through the headlines to bring you the critical context you need, focusing on what's really going on in news and politics. Welcome to the Analytical Iowan Podcast. This is your daily dose of fact-driven politics. Let's analyze today's news. Here's Eric.
And we are back here on the Analytical Iowan Podcast. It is Thursday, December 18th, as you are listening to this. And as I say almost every day, we got a lot to talk about because there's always a lot to talk about with this administration. Now let's get into it. Yesterday, we talked a lot about what was going to be the big announcement. Donald Trump had planned this big address to the public, and it was supposed to happen last night, 9 p.m. Eastern. I thought it was going to be in the Oval Office. Well, it turns out it was in another briefing room, holiday decor around and things like that. It could have been pre-recorded, or they had him hopped up on so many drugs and so many things. He didn't seem like his normal self. He actually seemed higher energy. He was angry. He was screaming into the void. And it was a melody of his greatest hits. Most of it was repeating things that he has already said. Okay. A lot of blaming Joe Biden, not a whole lot of what's coming next. And this really didn't need to be a public address to the country. It sounded more like a rally speech or Donald Trump, talking to, a group of supporters or maybe a State of the Union, something like that. Normally, when the president does a public address like that, it's something big and they're trying to make an impression and they're trying to either, bring everybody together after a tragedy or announce something huge that's coming or whatever. None of that is what this was. This was Donald Trump delivering a rally speech at best. Okay, now he looked pretty hopped up. He spent 18 minutes, 19 minutes, somewhere in there, screaming, pretty much yelling. He was agitated and fired up, but he wasn't slurring his words. He didn't appear to be low energy. So either they pre-recorded it and they caught it in the afternoon when he was higher energy, or he got a nap, or he was hopped up on something. We don't know. Now we know his health is an issue. And this is not the same Donald Trump we've been seeing lately. This didn't seem like the Donald Trump who falls asleep in cabinet meetings. But from what we saw, he didn't have the opportunity because he pretty much looked like he stayed on script, stuck to the teleprompter, and kept going. He didn't ad lib a lot or anything else. Now, what did he all cover? Well, he covered the tariffs and about how good they are for the economy, even though we know they're not. We know what tariffs are. Tariffs are a tax paid by the American consumer. They are not, as he likes to say, paid for by other countries. He still believes, despite all evidence to the contrary and numerous things about it, that if he puts a tariff on, say, Canada, that Canada's treasury magically pays the tariff, it goes into the United States Treasury, and we make all this money. That's not how that works. If Walmart, for example, brings something in from Canada and it's got a 50% tariff on it, when it hits the border, they are handed a tax bill for the tariff and they have to submit that to the government. Now, it would go down the chain of supply and ultimately end up at the store for a higher price tag. And we know that. We know that's how that works. But Donald Trump doesn't care about that. And of course, there's a certain segment of the population that because Donald Trump has said it, that is what that's what they believe. They believe it because he says it, because and part of that has to do with the fact that the MAGA base in their own way is actually patriotic in their way. Now, they're not, a lot of things they do are not patriotic. They go against everything that we stand for in this country. when it comes to things like wanting an authoritarian or a king or something like that. That is not what this country stands for. No, that is not patriotic. However, they believe what they are doing is in the best interest of the country, and they think that they genuinely care about the country, and they have a reverence of sorts when it's a Republican and someone they agree with for the office of president. They don't always care about the office holder when it was Biden or Obama and maybe even Clinton, people like that. But they still have a reverence for the office, and they think that Donald Trump, having been president now two separate occasions, two non-consecutive terms, that he has some special knowledge that they don't have. So when he says the foreign country pays the tariff, he must know something they don't because he's president. They can't put two and two together and think, well, maybe he's just a dumb fuck. That has never crossed their mind, at least for some of MAGA. So he was talking about the tariffs. Of course, he was talking about the economy. He comes out and says, we've got the hottest economy we've ever had. Our economy's booming. When I got into office 11 months ago, the economy was dead. The country was dead. We were a dead country. What does that mean? We weren't a dead country. We were steadily improving month after month. We were setting pace for jobs. Inflation had actually come way down. Um, Unemployment was down. Stock market was setting record highs. How can he look at that and say it was a dead economy, that the country was dead? Now, it was horrible when Joe Biden took over, and Joe Biden made it a lot better. Was it perfect? No. Was the job finished? No. But Donald Trump says, well, nothing was going on. We were stale. We were dying. This is typical Donald Trump. He wants all of the credit that he fixed something that he didn't fix. He wants to make people believe things that aren't true. He gaslights all the time, and he honestly thinks because he believes he is such a great orator that he can say anything and convince anybody of anything. That if he says it enough times, if he says it loud enough and long enough, that people will believe it, and that he will be able to go ahead and say whatever he wants, do whatever he wants, and they will go along with it. That's not true. And he can't keep saying the economy's good and that everything is great, because when you get going with it, it's not. Of course, he said affordability, everything's affordable, prices are down, inflation's down, except inflation's going back up, in part because of the tariffs. And you don't even need to say inflation's up. You just go to the store, look at your buying power. It's worse than it's ever been. Two examples I use all the time. Pound of ground beef. Pound of ground beef is getting up to $8 to $10 a pound, depending on what you get. And even catching it on sale anymore is almost $5. And that's here in Iowa where we grow beef. We raise beef. It should be cheaper here. And if it's that expensive for us, how is it for the rest of the country? And the other example I use all the time, you guys all see me drinking sodas in these podcasts. They're up to $10 a 12 pack, even more in some places. I'm seeing TikToks where they're up to, $11.99, $12.99 or more. And just a few short years ago, you could still routinely get 3 for 10, 4 for 10 on sale almost every week. There was some brand in that kind of a sale. Now, when I'm watching these sales, we're lucky to see 3 or 4 for 20 in a matter of 3 or 4 years. And that's for, obviously name brand, not store brand. Store brand is always going to be cheaper. But just those two items, everything's more expensive. But Donald Trump doesn't want you to look at and view things with your own eyes and go, oh, yeah, things are more expensive. It's ridiculous. No, he wants you to believe the lie he is saying about how good the economy is. It's not a good economy. He's wrecking it. If things keep going the way we are going, we are teetering on the edge. We are probably in a recession already, even though economists aren't quite calling it that. And if he doesn't do something, if we don't do something to change our trajectory, and it looks like everything they are changing is going to be making things worse, that we are going to go over the edge into a depression, potentially a Great Depression style event, something as bad as what we saw in 1929 when the stock market crashed. Now, a lot of people don't know exactly what happened with the stock market crash. I'm going to detour here for a minute for a kind of a short lesson. And I'm not an expert by any means with the stock market crash, but the stock market really hadn't been out that long when Black Friday happened, when the stock market crashed in 1929. But it had never dipped. It had had a constant stretch of nothing but increases, steadily increasing, and everybody was investing in the stock market. And the problem was there were no regulations in place, and banks were taking your deposit. I know hardly any of us were alive back then, but those that had money in the bank, maybe it was your great grandparents, whoever it was, your grandparents, whoever it was that had money in the bank during the Depression, they would take that deposit instead of holding on to it and making sure that they could pay out when other people needed to come in and get money. They played the stock market with it because it was viewed as, well, it had never gone down. So it was they thought it was safe. So they were doing that. But then because it was also safe, people were going out and they were saying, man, well, my buddy just made, 25% return on investment in the stock market. I want to get in on that, but I don't have any money. Oh shit, I'll go get a loan. They went and they got a loan and they'd invested in the stock market, thinking they'd make, oh, the bank will charge me 3%, I'll make 25, I'll come out ahead and it'll be fine. Well, then it finally crashed. And then when it crashed, nobody had the money to pay back. Banks didn't have any money to give out when people went to go get the money they had in the bank to pay back their loans, to pay their bills, do whatever. Banks closed, and it just everybody lost everything. And out of that came FDR and the New Deal. Now, that took several years. It took about 3 before we got to FDR because Herbert Hoover fucked around, said it's going to fix itself. And then they put tariffs on top of it, and tariffs wrecked things even more by making things more expensive. It had the opposite effect of what they want. And now we're looking at Donald Trump, who's fucking around with the economy, changing things here and there, fucking around with this, fucking around with that, laying people off, getting rid of regulations, and doing all sorts of shit. And his solution is tariffs to make things better. And in fact, he took an economy that was working pretty good under Joe Biden. It wasn't perfect, it had its problems. And one of the things they weren't focused enough on was kitchen table issues about whether or not you can afford your rent or whether you could afford your groceries. They were looking more big picture, and well, the economy's doing good because stock market's doing good. They weren't looking at Main Street, they were focused on Wall Street. And that was a problem on the Democrat side. I'm going to fault them for that. Okay. But Donald Trump comes in and messes it all up, and now it's way worse. We're teetering on this edge of a recession or a depression. He wants to say, yeah, I fixed it. Economy's great. We don't need to talk about affordability no more. He thinks if he says it long enough, loud enough, or on the right stage, people are just going to believe him when he says things are better, and that's all it's going to take. But like I said, don't take my word for it. Go to the store, check out the prices. Sure, there are going to be things that are still cheap, and some things you can still afford, but we've gotten things out of hand in this country. We flipped things around. We can't afford our rent anymore. You can't afford your mortgage payment or whatever, or you're worried about that, about making that payment. And it used to be you'd go in and you'd buy a TV. TV was, more than a month's rent. You had to decide, you had to save, you had to make a plan. Now they've gotten so cheap, well, I don't know how I'm going to pay my rent, but my TV went out, I'm going to go buy a new one. I know people who have done just that. Said, I'll figure something out to get the rent paid, but I need a new TV. And they spent a couple $100 and bought themselves a 50, 60-inch TV. We got things out of whack here in this country. We need to do a major overhaul. We haven't raised the minimum wage since 2009. It's still sitting at 7.25. And I know a lot of places are paying more than that, but that's not the point. They're only paying it because they absolutely have to, because they can't find anybody for less. And I know places, even here in my little town, um, that going rate is 15 plus, and they're still putting ads out trying to get people in at 13 or 14. Trying for 12 and going, well, we can't. Oh, we're short staffed. Be nice to us. We can't get anybody to work today, because they don't want to. No, it's not that nobody wants to work. It's they don't want to work for the wages you're offering. They can't live on that. But according to Donald Trump, the economy's fixed. And I think part of that was trying to send a message to the Supreme Court. He thought maybe if he did this message to the American people and said everything was affordable again, and how much money the tariffs have raised and all of this, that he's trying to force the Supreme Court's hand, because we're waiting for a decision from the Supreme Court about his tariffs as to whether or not they are legal. That's what we're waiting on. We're waiting to see what they say. Are they legal? Does he have the authority to put them on? And does he have to repay them if they are not legal, if they're unconstitutional? And if he has to repay them, what's going to happen to that money? It's going to go back to the companies, and the companies are going to put it on their bottom line. They're going to give their execs and their top people bonuses, and the people at the bottom are going to be left holding the bag, more than likely. This is a huge wealth transfer up in this country, and just another way to screw over the lower and middle classes. But he says the economy's fine. It's not. Now, he also went on to talk about how they're launching Trump RX. This is like the fourth time he's mentioned Trump RX. And if you don't know what Trump RX is, this is supposed to be this exchange website. It's not operational yet that I'm aware of. It's going to be operational soon. And you're supposed to be able to go there and get your prescriptions filled through Trump RX. So Trump RX is a website where Donald Trump wants you to go get your prescriptions filled. So instead of going to your local pharmacy or wherever you would get your prescriptions filled, you would log into this website, apparently, and you would get your prescription filled there, and they would mail you your script, something like that. Now, sure, that works for some things. Maybe. If you're on the script, month in, month out, and you're going to get it, maybe you can handle having your prescriptions mailed to you. But for time-sensitive meds, that's not going to work. And it's supposed to be something set up where Donald Trump, in most of the time, it's been in exchange for lowering the tariffs, that you are going to be able to save money by going through this. You go on there. Donald Trump has worked out these deals with the pharmaceutical suppliers, the drug companies, and your meds are going to be cheaper that way. But how is that going to work? Realistically, it's not. This is all just one big thing. I wouldn't trust anything with Donald Trump's name on it. I guarantee you there's a grift here. They put his name on it. He's probably thinking he can get a cut, he can get a taste. Maybe it's a branding deal where, he gets 10 cents of every transaction, or he gets so much of every interaction because it's got his name on it, or who knows. But the whole thing is Donald Trump claims he's going to make drugs cheaper. And he went back on his normal rant. Now, he said he was going to lower them by 400, 500, even 600%. As always, when it comes to Donald Trump making these claims, he's got no clue how math works. He's got no clue how percentages work. And this isn't even the worst claim he has made for drug prices. In the past, he has said things like he was going to lower them 1,400%. Now, I'm going to use basic math here. If he lowers the drug price 500%, and your prescription would normally be $10, that would mean every time you went to go pick up your script, the pharmaceutical company would pay you $40. Because if you lower something over 100%, that means you're getting a rebate. Now, the confusion for Donald Trump probably is coming from, Well, when the prices went up, they said it went up by 100%. So I can say it goes down by 100%. That's not how that math works. You can always go up by more than 100%. That just means if your script was $10 and it went up by 40%, well, guess what? Now it's $50. That's how that math works. That's basic math. Most grade schoolers would be able to understand that, at least when it comes to the hundreds of percentages. That would be the easy part. And a calculator would have told him that, right? But Donald Trump doesn't care about that. Once again, he's just going to say it because it sounds good. It makes a good soundbite when he comes out and says, I'm going to lower your drugs by 600%. He thinks it makes a good soundbite, makes a good headline. And there is a segment of this country, again, that will just believe it because he says it. It doesn't have to be true. And they're going to say, oh man, my drugs are going to be cheaper. Here's the thing Joe Biden had in place actual caps on certain medication, including insulin for people on Medicaid and Medicare. Donald Trump threw those out the window. That would actually save people money. That the most out of pocket you are going to spend on these prescriptions is this much, period. That would help people. This Trump RX is just another grift, another scam, trying to get people to go with something Donald Trump supported. And not all drug companies are going to be part of Trump RX. And not all medications are going to be part of Trump RX. So it's only going to be select medications, and it's only going to be certain companies that Donald Trump has partnered with so far. And they're going to try to drive you to take the medications they want you to take, not necessarily what you want to have. This is not going to fix healthcare. Now, while we are on healthcare, we are waiting to see if they actually hold a vote today or tomorrow on the Affordable Care Act subsidies. Those are set to expire at the end of the calendar year. There are enough Republican votes in the House to pass or to go with a discharge petition to extend the Affordable Care Act subsidies. We're waiting to see what they do with that. Now, I still think it is going to be a 2-year extension. As far as that is how they're going to play it off. Why 2 years? Well, they extend it 2 years. One, it doesn't expire at the end of this year. They don't have to deal with the wrath of the voter in next year's midterm election for their cost of healthcare going up. Okay. And then with it being 2 years, it's after the midterm election. So the entire midterm is not centered around their healthcare going up. That's not the questions they have to answer. They can dodge it. But then if they go out more than that, if they go out 3, then you're setting it up into 2028, which would make the general election in 28 all about healthcare. And they don't want that either. Anything beyond that, you're worried about a Democrat being in office, and that's not going to work. Now, Donald Trump does not want to sign an ACA extension. He wants something like a health savings plan. But they want to make it specifically named after Donald Trump. Trump Care Plan or something like that. And instead of paying the subsidy and making sure your premium is lower, they want to give you the money directly and he says, well, they can just go buy their own health care. Buy it from where? The only place they can go is back to the insurance company. But Donald Trump says, no, don't give the money to the insurance company, just go buy your own health care. See, that's great for somebody who has always had money like Donald Trump. I guarantee you, before becoming president, he never had a health care plan. Probably not. He would just go to the doctor when he needed it for whatever he needed and get treated and pay cash because he could afford to. Most Americans are one major medical disaster away from bankruptcy, losing their house, all sorts of bad outcomes. And Donald Trump doesn't care. Thinking the billionaire is actually on your side and is out to do something in favor for you and is going to care about whether or not you have health care or just whether or not you can have food or pay your bills or anything. It's like thinking that the stripper is actually in love with you. Or for maybe more of a modern take on it for the younger folks in the audience, it's like thinking the OnlyFans model actually has a thing for you and that you have a chance of meeting her and having a relationship or something. No. In most cases, no. Not going to happen. They say the same thing to everybody, and they only want one thing from you, and that is your money. In Donald Trump's case, same thing. All he wants from you is your support, your admiration, your money. He doesn't care whether or not you have health care. He doesn't care whether or not you can eat. But Donald Trump was focusing on this Trump RX. And that's his big plan, to save health care and the health savings accounts. It's going to cause insurances to go up. And he comes out a few days ago and goes, when he was asked, well, what are you going to say to the like 24 million people who are going to lose their insurance if the subsidies expire? He's like, well, you say it like it's a bad thing, or you make it sound so bad, is what he said, actually. Let me get the quote right. Yeah, it's bad. 24 million people losing access to healthcare is a bad thing. But he doesn't see it that way. He thinks he's going to be able to pull off some big victory and make this work. Now, we will see if Mike Johnson ends up doing something. There's been a lot of speculation that he is going to send the House home early, and that they're not even going to vote on this until next year. We will see if he actually does that. If they kick the can down the road for the ACA subsidies, let them expire, and then deal with it next year. That's possible. Now, Republicans have been trying to get rid of the ACA going on 10 or 15 years now. I think they passed it in 2010. They have never had a plan to replace it with anything decent. They don't have a solution. And the Affordable Care Act is based on Mitt Romney's plan from Massachusetts. It's based on Romney Care. But again, they don't want to hear that either. They just want to bash it because it's bad. Obama came up with it. They don't want it to succeed. So they're going to do everything in their power to make it fail. And defunding the ACA, if they let these subsidies expire, is one step toward it. And if it fails, then people are going to be more open to the idea of getting rid of it. And that's where Republicans are heading for. That's what they want. They want people pissed at the ACA because they legitimately do not think people are going to blame them. They think that they're going to be insulated in a bubble and say, well, see, we took away the money, so the ACA failed. Proves the ACA doesn't work. No, it proves we have a problem with our healthcare system. Healthcare in this country has gotten out of hand. Insurance is too expensive, and people are suffering because of it. We need to figure out a way to fix our healthcare system, and the single payer option may be the best option. Now, if the ACA subsidies do expire, if this fails, and if we go through a period of 2 or 3 years of suffering without the ACA working as intended, this could end up leading to people clamoring and a big change coming after the 2028 general, when Democrats, I believe, are going to be back in power, that we end up moving closer, if not all the way, towards something like a single payer, universal health care, Medicare for all, something like that. Studies have been done proving it would actually save us money in the long run. And I think if they fuck around with the healthcare too much, that is going to have a major effect. Now, as I was talking with Mike, the Rational Boomer, on his podcast the other night, I think, what was that? We recorded it Tuesday night. So yesterday's podcast, we were talking about one of the things about getting us closer to Medicare for all or universal health care or something that would be a plus for going out to 28, is that the silent generation and the baby boomers are dying off. Thousands a day. This old generation, and not all baby boomers and not all silent generation are this way, but there are a lot of them that have this mentality of, well, I've paid for insurance my whole life. Why should we change it now? I paid for my insurance. Why should we give anybody else Medicare? Why should we give them Medicare for all? Why should we make it universal now? Same thing with student loans. Well, I paid off my student debt, or I didn't have college loans and I made a living. They can't see past the end of their own face. They don't see past their nose when it comes to doing anything for somebody else. They are only worried about themselves and how well they did it in such and such way. That's got to be the right way to do it. So everybody else should do it like they did, not realizing that the world has changed around them. Healthcare costs are out of hand. It is so expensive anymore. Like I said, the majority of Americans are one medical disaster away from bankruptcy. And because Donald Trump changed the rules, you can't declare medical debt on bankruptcies anymore. They're still there, I believe. At least that's what they're trying to do. Now, going back to this meeting with Donald Trump, or this a public address to the nation, one of the other things he brought up were these what he called patriot dividend checks. Okay, or something like that. Warrior dividend, I think it was something like that, where he's going to give the military. He claimed from tariffs a $1,776 bonus, and he claims that they just told him that it got approved right before he took to talking to the press. You ever notice there's a lot of these big events where he gets some big piece of news or something like that? He comes out, well, they just told me. Makes you wonder if he's telling the truth. But supposedly, now he is saying that there's $1,776 bonus going out to the military. Except for finding out that's not true. Apparently, this money was coming from a housing fund that had already been approved by Congress. It was for something else entirely. And he's reskinning it, calling it a new bonus, calling it something else. And it's not even coming from the spot he says. He says it's from the tariff revenue. And it was in the Defense Authorization Act, I believe, that he signed. They're not related at all. But he wants you to believe that the tariffs are involved. Why? Because he's trying to connect patriotism in the military to the tariffs so that you're more happy to pay them. And beyond that, he is again trying to pressure the Supreme Court, like we talked about earlier. Supreme Court's waiting on a decision, or they have a decision coming about these tariffs and about whether or not Donald Trump is allowed to put them on and what's going to happen with them. Well, now if he's tied these Patriot dividend checks to the tariffs, well, now the Supreme Court's got to go, well, do we really want to say we're taking away these dividend checks from the military? Donald Trump thinks doing this is going to put pressure on the Supreme Court to side his way. It's not going to happen. Now, the other thing with these checks is he made a claim that they're going to be able to get them done before Christmas. Well, that might be possible, considering Christmas is about a week away. That they are, that they're going to be doing that only because this money had already been approved through Congress for something else. Like I said, they took this housing fund. So it was money the troops were already going to get for a different purpose, and he's just rebranding it and calling it something else. As I've seen multiple people on TikTok pointing out, and this is an old expression, Donald Trump is trying to piss on your leg and tell you it's raining. So he's actively taking away this housing assistance or this housing bonus or whatever it was, this housing allotment from the military, rebranding it, calling it something else, giving it back to them, and saying, well, see, I'm giving you a dividend. I'm giving you a bonus. How great am I? But then what about the other money? What about the housing stuff that they were going to cover? Are these checks more money than what they were getting before? Is it less? Did we haven't heard all the details now about this rebrand of this thing. Are people getting less money than they were before? Is this just roughly what they would have gotten for 1 month anyway? And sure, they won't get it this month with this rebrand. They'll get the dividend or whatever they want to call it. And then if it's monthly, then in January, do they get the regular payment like normal? Or are they just going to try to do away with it? Because if they're trying to do away with it and rebrand it and they're changing too much about it, depending on how it was authorized by Congress, it might not be legal. Congress controls the power of the purse. But Donald Trump, again, doesn't care about that. He doesn't care about how the Constitution works or anything. He just wants the headline. So now he's coming out saying they're doing this. And like I said, they're rebranding something that was already in place. And he's pretty much tempting the Democrats to come out and sue him to prevent him from doing it. Now, if they were to sue him to prevent him from doing it, depending on what they're doing and how what the actual wording is in the law that Congress passed about this housing allotment that he's rebranding, Donald Trump has this headline. He can say, "Well, see, Democrats don't like the troops; they're anti-American." Go ahead, because he thinks Democrats would be less likely to try to sue to stop him from doing what he wants if they think there's going to be a bad press story about it, and that they could get it spun against them because and make it sound like they hate the military. Because Republicans have co-opted patriotism in the military as their thing. And Donald Trump knows there's a good section of this country that is 100% behind the military, and the person that comes out the loudest saying they're supporting the military is going to get their vote, is going to get their support, is going to get cheered. This isn't even about Donald Trump caring about the military. Remember, he dodged the draft 5 separate occasions during Vietnam with bone spurs. And that means 5 other people had to go in his place. 5 other men took his place in Vietnam, and we don't know whatever happened to those particular people. There's no way to know who potentially went over because Donald Trump didn't. But 5 other people got drafted instead of Donald Trump because he claimed bone spurs. He was too important to go. He doesn't care about the military. Remember, he's called them losers and suckers. He talked about the late John McCain when John McCain was running. I don't remember if John McCain was running for office or if it was after, or if it was when Donald Trump had started running himself. And he said about John McCain that he prefers his war heroes to not have been captured. Remember, McCain spent like 2 or 3 years, I think it was, as a POW, I believe, during Vietnam. And of course, all Donald Trump could say is, "I prefer my heroes to not have been captured." He spins everything, has nothing good to ever say about anybody else, and he doesn't give 2 shits about the military. So this whole address also highlighted Donald Trump's health. Okay. Like I said, it looked like it could have been either pre-recorded or it could have been that they had him hopped up on who knows what, because he didn't seem like what we've seen of him lately. And we know Donald Trump is having a lot of problems. Now, Donald Trump probably will not make it to the end of his term with his health. Let's be honest. Let's be realistic. If you look at how he's going, they have told us he has chronic venous insufficiency. That's why his ankles are so swollen. But his problems go well beyond chronic venous insufficiency. If you look at how he walks, he drags a foot a lot of times. Not being able to lift your foot and land heel first can be a sign of a stroke. When he stands, he leans forward. He's got the tilt. That is the sign of somebody potentially suffering dementia. Okay? He's appeared lost and confused numerous times in public, like when he was in Japan on that Asia trip. And as much as the right like to go after Joe Biden and keep circling back to things where they made Donald Trump look foolish with how they framed things, this wasn't a thing where the left even did it. There are numerous news outlets and from around the world that showed the same images. Donald Trump was supposed to walk up to the American and Japanese flags that were side by side with the prime minister. They were supposed to be about the same pace the whole way through. Turn and bow. Donald Trump gets there. He's kind of shuffling past. He's walking at a little faster pace than she is. And he kind of gets up to the American flag. He's kind of got this faraway look in his eye, gives it a salute, doesn't really stop, and just keeps on walking. And you watch the Japanese Prime Minister, and I wish I could think of her name right now, but I can't. She turns and she just got this wide-eyed, draw-down look that she can't believe he just did that. Completely blew off the ceremony. And at several other times, you watch him very carefully walk down railings and stairs, like he's afraid of falling forward. He's even said that doctors have told him if he's not careful going down steps, he could fall. His health is not good. He is not in good shape in the least. So odds are he doesn't make it to the end of his term. You add in all of that, plus the fact that he's talked about having an MRI. We don't know entirely what the MRI was looking at. Were they looking at his heart? Were they looking at his brain? Uh, I know it's a stretch to think that he has either one of those, but we don't know what that was all about. Now, there's going to be people on the right saying, well, Donald Trump should have the same medical privacy that everybody does. And to an extent, I would agree. However, he is also the president of the country. We need to know, maybe not to the extent of how bad things are, but we should know if he is incapable of running the country. Are we looking at a ticking time bomb where he could have a heart attack tomorrow? Are we going to be dealing with something in 2 months or 3 months because his arteries are so clogged? Potentially, we don't know that for sure. But is that what they're worried about? That he may have to go in and have open heart surgery and stents put in? We don't know. Now, all we have is some fabricated doctor's notes that sound like Donald Trump wrote them. They sound like a rally speech the way they're written. Oh, he's in perfect health and he's got like 4% body fat and he's 215 pounds. It is such a high fantasy, you can't possibly think it's true. So we're worried about Donald Trump and his health, especially after this Oval Office, or this it wasn't an Oval Office meeting. I keep thinking it was there. This public address, and we have to have we should be having these conversations and being concerned about what's going to happen. Now, if Donald Trump goes by the wayside, if he does choke on that Big Mac, I saw a creator on TikTok reposting from another creator. I don't know where this started, but somebody suggested they may have to bury Donald Trump at sea because the number of people who would be making pilgrimages to Donald Trump's grave, both the MAGAs that would go there to venerate it because they'd be waiting for him to rise from the ground 3 days later, and the rest of the world that would be going there to defile that grave and leave their mark there. It would be similar to what people thought about with Osama bin Laden, which is why Osama bin Laden ended up getting buried at sea, because they were worried about his grave and becoming a shrine or some kind of a holy site. Now, I don't know what's going to happen that route, but we'll have to see. Now, let's move on to something else that has got Donald Trump's attention. We are at the 18th. Tomorrow, as I'm recording this, tomorrow is the day. Okay, tomorrow is the day where they release or they are supposed to release the Epstein files. I don't know if it's by end of day. I don't know if it's supposed to be first thing in the morning. We will have to see what Friday brings us. But we are supposed to see more about the Epstein files. And I know Donald Trump is terrified. They are probably going to try to find some way of cutting around the whole thing, trying to say, well, we got to cut it up, we got to cut back. There's an open investigation. We can't release everything. we don't know what they are going to try to release to the public. But Democrats on the House Oversight Committee just a little bit ago, a few days ago, they released several photos from the Epstein estate, and they have 90,000 images, with more to be released to the public soon. And as these images are getting put out there, it's a reminder to Donald Trump that they don't hold all the cards. There are other places that have copies of everything that's going on. It is a reminder to Donald Trump and other high ranking Republicans that other people know what is in the files. Now, with the Epstein file release, we have had several members of the Republican Party, Thomas Massie, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and a few others, have said they've seen things in the files. They have an idea of what should be there. And if Republicans or if this administration fucks around too bad with the Epstein files and not releasing everything, that they will start reading client names on the House floor. And that the list of names would be from survivors of Epstein. Now, we already know some people who have been connected to Epstein. And so far, the images that have come out that I've seen aren't that damning. They are mostly just showing events and parties, no context given. But a lot of them just show who knew Epstein, who was with him in varying settings. And it looks bad for some people. Prominent people like Bill Gates, Bill Clinton, Steve Bannon, Donald Trump. They show that Donald Trump knew Epstein. And Donald Trump wants us to forget that they were friends. But apparently, these photos are proving that they knew him. And again, no context here. But apparently, at one of the events, there was a bowl full of condoms. And on the wrapper, it was specially made packaging where it had a picture of Donald Trump. And it said, "It's huge," or "I'm huge." So they were making fun of this fucker in the 90s and early 2000s, maybe up to the 2010s. We don't know exactly when that photo was taken. Now, Donald Trump normally would hit back against somebody for making that joke. We haven't heard anything about that. He hasn't come out and said anything publicly about that photo. Not really. You know, of course, he says his greatest hits that the Epstein files are a Democratic hoax to embarrass him. He wants us to believe, because some of these photos and images and stuff go back to the 80s and the 90s, early 2000s when Jeffrey Epstein, before he got caught. He wants us to believe that the Democrats knew way back then that in 2016, Donald Trump was going to run for president as a Republican, that they planted enough stuff in the Epstein files, or they gave Epstein enough evidence to sink Donald Trump, but they wouldn't use it against him during his first term. They didn't use it against him during the term in between when the Democrats were in charge. No, they were going to wait until he became the second president in U.S. history to ever have been elected to non-consecutive terms. And that's when they were going to bring it out and embarrass him. It doesn't make a lick of sense, except to somebody like Donald Trump, who has severe mental issues, the dementia, the other cognitive problems, the raging narcissism beyond it, all of it. He's looking out over his shoulder that he is convinced that something is going to happen. So we will have to see what comes out from the DOJ tomorrow with the Epstein files as they get released. It is supposed to be in a downloadable, searchable format. We will see how downloadable, how searchable, and if there is a database that does get released, expect weeks of content from creators as they are digging through it and finding all sorts of connections. And not just Bill Gates, not just Prince Andrew or former Prince Andrew because he lost his royal title, or Clinton or Bill Gates or Bannon or whoever. you are going to have all sorts of people in all walks of life that are going to be connected, and tons of people are going to have to be playing cover up and protection at that point, they're going to be doing damage control, trying to save their reputations. So expect that. Now, I kind of thought that this big address from the Oval Office, and I keep saying that, but I know it wasn't the Oval Office. It was this address to the public was going to be some kind of a distraction from the Epstein files, that they didn't want the Epstein files released, that they were going to announce how they were going to not release them or something. That didn't happen. The other big relief coming out of this address to the public is that even though we have currently blockaded Venezuela, and Donald Trump is claiming that we are doing it to reclaim the oil, the land, and I think it was the minerals, or something else that Venezuela has stolen from us. Now, I have no idea what he's talking about or what he thinks might be going on, but he's blockading and he's talking about seizing ships and stuff, basically piracy. There's no justification for any sort of move like this. Now, obviously, Venezuela is going to ask the UN and other countries to try to help, and we'll have to see. Now, we kind of were worried. One of the things I was worried about, and other creators were as well, that this big Oval Office, this big address to the public was going to be him coming out and saying, I don't need Congress. I'm declaring war on narco terrorists, and we're going into Venezuela. Really thought he was going to do that. At least I was worried he was going to try it or even talk about Venezuela. He didn't mention them once, at least from what I've seen. Really thought he was going to make that attempt. Now, he hasn't changed anything as far as Venezuela goes. He's still got it blockaded. He is still talking about them as being horrible, and he's talking about doing land strikes. But his posture on that might change after tomorrow, after the Epstein files start to be released. I think that is going to change how he handles a lot of things, and I think he's going to start looking over his shoulder. So we got lucky that he wasn't addressing Venezuela. Still a problem. We got to deal with that. But I think going back to the Epstein files for a minute, with them being released tomorrow, that the Republicans are going to use, if he fucks around too bad with it, or if he is, whatever is released to the public that proves he's in there, they are going to use that as their way to get rid of Donald Trump. Maybe not until next year. They may not do anything until after the Christmas and holiday break, but they may come back and say, yeah, we got to get rid of that fucker. We want to have a chance to win in 26 and not lose the House by 40, 50, 60 votes. I've been saying that if the Affordable Care Act subsidies do not get extended, I had previously said that I think Republicans lose the House by 40 or 50 seats. I think if the ACA subsidies expire and they don't do anything, and it's proven that it is Republicans' fault that they didn't take up votes or they didn't compromise or anything, that they guarantee they lose the House by 50 plus. And I think Republicans may get spooked about that over the holiday season. And if Donald Trump is in the files, as bad as we think he could be, that they may come back and go, we got to get rid of that fucker. We don't want to lose the House by 50 seats. We may lose it, but we want to keep it close. We want to only lose it by 10, maybe 15 seats. Something manageable, so we have a fighting chance to reclaim it in 28. Now they won't, but that's what they're going to. That's going to be their mindset, is going to be wanting to reclaim and hold on to power in the general in 28. So I think that's what we're looking at here, is we are looking at the Republicans using the Epstein files as their way to get rid of Donald Trump, and he doesn't realize it yet. I think this address to the public was an attempt to get ahead of some things, and he's trying to remind everybody of how great he is, and that he's fixed everything, so that even when the bad things come out from the Epstein files, that they can overlook it, or he's hoping they'll overlook it and say, well, see, Donald Trump's a great guy. He fixed the economy, even though you go to the store on your own, you take a look around, and you see everything just is more expensive. You go to it doesn't take much to get to hundreds of dollars in groceries anymore. But Donald Trump wants you to believe everything's affordable, and it's not. All right, so that's going to do it for today's episode of the Analytical Iowan podcast. I want to thank you for taking the time to join me. I'll be back tomorrow, where we're going to discuss, even more is getting dissected from this address, as there's always something to talk about, because there's always stuff going on with this administration, and anything else that happens to come up along the way, whether Congress had done something on the ACA subsidies. Maybe by the time I've recorded it, there's been movement on the files. Probably not. But maybe we'll have a better idea. If not, we might have more of an idea about the Epstein files come Saturday. And, I'm here every day, so I'll be back talking about everything going on Saturday as well. And hopefully then we have some more insight on the Epstein files, and maybe some more movement that way. So I want to thank you for taking the time to join me. I hope you have a great day, and I will be back tomorrow.
That was Eric. That does it for our analysis today. If you appreciated us cutting through the noise to get to the critical context, please make sure you're subscribed to the Analytical Iowan podcast on Spotify and YouTube. We'll be back tomorrow. Thanks for listening.